Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
Okay, and we're live. Thanks for tuning in to Boundless Authenticity. Today I have a special guest, Brownell Landrum, but I'm going to let her tell you exactly who she is and what she does.
Okay, well, you said my name right, so thank you for that. Where do I start? Well, I'm an author, so I guess that's the first thing that people might want to know about. I like delving into what I call metaphysical mysteries in my writing. I have a new trilogy coming out in a few days, so I'm excited about that. That is epic reincarnation mystery about a famous couple from history who's reincarnated today. And they're here to fulfill a prophecy that'll change the world. So it's kind of Da Vinci Code meets Outlander with a reincarnation theme. I like writing those stories a lot. I even have a podcast called Life is a Trip Reincarnation and Afterlife Stories. And with that, it's not an interview podcast like this. It's basically people write and share stories and we record them and people can go to our podcast and listen to them. I don't know. What else do you want to know about me? Authenticity?
The concept for your podcast is very interesting. I like that a lot. I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, as somebody who writes these kinds of stories, I also have a Facebook group called Life is a Trip, a Reincarnation Stories. So please join us on that. And as somebody who writes a lot of these stories, I just think there need to be more stories like this out there. I mean, they can be fictional or factual, so we don't care. It's not like, oh, it's got to fit this, box or whatever. We've got a variety of different kinds of stories. Some are funny, some are really serious. The only thing we don't allow is horror. But I just want more stories out there in the world. So that's why I wanted to do it, is just get more of these stories. I don't want to be the only one. And I know I'm not the only one, but, it feels like I'm the only one writing these stories.
So what exactly inspires you?
I want to change the world. Is that okay?
No, it's not okay. You can't do that. How dare you?
You want to be authentic, right? This is about authenticity. Right. Honestly, it sounds like kind of, convoluted or highfalutin or whatever the right word, but is, when I think, like personally, it doesn't matter to me if people believe in reincarnation, but I think when they start opening their minds to the possibility, then all of a sudden, like one thing that matters a lot to me is, we can be when you reincarnate, you can go through many, many lifetimes, and you probably have been multiple races, multiple nationalities, both male and female and in between, and so when you sit there and think, oh, well, this group is bad, or this kind of racism, or this kind of classism, or whatever, like it all kind of seems silly when you realize that you've probably been, in fact, I wrote a screenplay and I wrote a song for the screenplay. And one of the lyrics is, the soul has no gender, no creed, and no race. Love can be found in any face, right? So when you start realizing it, I just think it opens up so many possibilities. And I think an open mind is, a really important thing for this world.
I would agree with you. I think that in general, this world suffers from a disease called ignorance. And it's all about, not saying that people are dumb, but it's all about information that just is being ignored to preserve one way of thinking. This kind of circular thinking. And I don't really think it's going to be a thing that humans figure out how to get rid of. I stopped thinking that a long time ago. But I realized that there are more people out there that deep down inside of them, they know that things like reincarnation are real. But it's just really hard for them to admit. And I have not yet been able to figure out what's behind that fear, if you catch what I'm saying.
Yeah. First of all, you just blew my mind. My mind's still reeling of, my whole life, I've never put the connection between ignorance and ignored. And so like my mind is like, wow, yes, I guess that is that's in a way a deliberate ignoring what could be there, like putting up blinders, I guess, to something that could be true. So thank you for that. Like I said, I love an open mind, and you just open mind. And I know I'm going to be, I used to have a friend who would tell me like, he's like, I'd tell you something, Brownell, and then weeks later, you'd be still thinking about it. So I probably will still be thinking about that. And I think, as far as why are people afraid, I think they do get caught up in their little boxes and, this is not what I learned in church, or this is not what I heard from my parents. And they don't understand it. And I think, honestly, one of the things that's so important to me for my group, because we have, the Facebook group as well as this podcast, is, again, fictional or factual. So we're not going to force somebody in our way of thinking either, right? We want to have a variety of kinds of stories that can make people look, oh, well, it could be this way or this way. And in fact, many years ago, I met a man one time, and he said to me something really profound that I still think about, many, many years later. And he said, Brownell, he said, you're an explorer, and you're always going to be an explorer. And what he meant by that is, I'm never going to be completely satisfied with one answer. I'm going to keep looking for more answers and more expansion, to the story. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that. Like, I was talking to a woman the other day, very, very devout, far to the extreme Christian, if you will. And I was like, well, the whole foundation of Christianity is reincarnation. And she just got really freaked out over that. And I said, yeah, it's all about Jesus coming back again, right? Isn't that kind of like the big thing? And reincarnation was a known thing back in his day, right? So it wouldn't have been an odd thing. Now, of course, you probably know it's been edited out of the Bible and all these things. But she just couldn't get her head into it. I said, well, you don't think he's just going to manifest from dirt and just become a person again? She's like, oh, yes, he can do anything. And I was like, okay. She was so caught in her box that, and I don't, she doesn't have to agree with me or anything, but she was so caught in her box, she just couldn't understand that it didn't make sense. There's one thing to have faith, and it's another thing to think it's going to be something that far out there, whereas isn't it a lot easier to believe his soul can just come back in another body? Isn't that a little simpler? So I don't know. I don't know if I answered your question, but we definitely went down that rabbit hole.
Well, I believe it was Whitley Strieber that once said, beliefs are walls and questions are doors.
Oh, I love
that. Yeah, I think that many people know how to very quickly build another wall in front of that door when you ask them a question. They are master contractors. They should probably make a business out of that.
Probably. Well, and Mark Manson says that answering questions is the key, or solving problems is the key. I think it is solving problems is the key to happiness. Yeah, that's what it is. Happiness is solving problems. And I thought that was so, I always think that's so interesting, is because you get your brain so engaged to looking for, like, if I said to her, how do you think he's going to come back? Do you think he's really going to come out of dirt and ash and, from thousands of years ago, or a shroud or something, and she wouldn't have had the answer, but she just would have said whatever she learned in church. But, I like asking questions. I like stories. Stories are so important. They kind of help you. Like, that's one of, like I said, fictional or factual, because I have noticed that there are people that will read my novels or listen to the stories on the podcast or whatever that wouldn't necessarily say they believe in reincarnation, but they love the stories. And then that opens their mind. So sometimes fiction, you don't have to believe in time travel to enjoy Back to the Future. You can open your mind to all kinds of possibilities. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Right. And it's just fiction that did it.
Yeah, it's true. And throughout history, so many works of fiction have actually been containers for the truth. And
in fact, that's my tagline. Did you see that in my writing?
I did not see that, no.
My tagline for my writing is, lose yourself in the fiction, find yourself in the truth.
Very curious indeed.
Very curious.
Yeah, you're right. And I wonder what are your other goals besides changing the world for this new book that you're releasing?
Well, I'll circle back to that, but I want to kind of get back to what you were just saying as far as, where and how these things get written, because there's also a story that I wrote this year. I've been through quite a year. And when you're, again, back to the topic of authenticity, I have been through like this huge year. I'm living a nomadic life. I don't know where I'm going to be next. I mean, like I'm really unsure. And I say kicked out of my apartment, but when my landlord raised the rent 50% last year, I was like, okay, I've got to do something because I can't stay here. And so that led me to go to Italy. And then that led me to go to Tunisia because I couldn't stay in Italy because they weren't taking visa applications. And it just led one thing to another. And I decided to tell people, in my social media, like, this is what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to these places. Some days I'm having a not so good day. Some days I'm having this fabulous day. And as I'm doing this, I realize people are really drawn to that authenticity. They want to know these stories. And I'm kind of like, I don't think it's that interesting, but sure, if you want to know, what I'm doing. And then I started writing another story, which is getting to the answer to your question, like, what more do I want to accomplish? And I got inspired to write another story that I'm offering to anybody listening to this for free. So feel free to hit me up for a copy of it. I call it The End, a Love Story to the Universe. And as I'm inspired to write it because I met somebody when I was in Tunisia. And as I'm writing the story, I'm writing it from the perspective of what I call the upstairs, right? So there's whatever you want to call that world up there. I specifically like to call it the upstairs because I haven't ever heard anybody else call it that. And it's another way to just kind of like take away the walls. But I'm writing these kind of characters from the upstairs. And then all of a sudden I realize they're real. Like, they're telling me who they are as I'm writing it. It's becoming real as I'm writing it. And to see it manifest and see what they wanted to do. And I call it the traffic angels. If you've got this person here and this person here, how do you bring them together? And there's they run the logistics upstairs, and they're trying to how do you get an American woman to meet a British man in Tunisia? Like, they had to work really hard to make that happen. And it just opened up so much for me to go, wow, this is, I have to just do whatever they tell me to do. I'm just kind of like, where they want me to go next is where they want me to go next. And it's been really, really interesting. So, I would love more people to get into writing and to open up those portals and get that communication and find out, who are your guides and what are they doing? And we don't really realize, I don't even think that we have a team. Like, there's a team up there. This isn't just, we've got one guide who's looked over and it's like, no, they kind of work together, and they work together with other people. Like this man that I met, his guide is also up there and part of the team. So it just kind of changed a lot for me. So, just sharing these stories, being on your podcast, whoever gets to hear and goes, wait a minute, this is interesting. Why don't I disrupt my own life and figure out where I'm going? And let me see if I can maybe get some information. Because up until then, I was like, I have to go here and have to go here and make these plans. And they all fell apart when I tried to direct. And then I was like, okay, what do y'all want? And they only tell me a little bit ahead of time. They don't tell me too much.
That's such an interesting thing that you said when you said when you try to direct, because I have found my own experience of life is whenever I've tried to take complete control over things, life just says, no, you're not doing that. What do you think you're doing? That's my job. And it throws something out there that's completely off the wall, and you never know what direction it will lead you in. But I also wanted to... It's so much more
exciting, isn't it? When you let that happen, when you go, wait a minute, I wouldn't have thought, I thought I was going to go to Italy for a year. They're not taking visa applications. Now, you could go, and I'll get into it if you want, but I wrote a book called 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen. So when people say everything happens for a reason, I literally wrote the book on it, right? And yet watching this happen, realizing how much is orchestrated and how much we're being helped, and we don't realize it. Like, sometimes I look at them like border collies, and we're going here, and they just go, "No, we want you over here," and they'll knock you a little bit around if you don't listen. So,
yeah, it's true. That phrase, how much we're being helped, is very, very critical for people to understand. It's really easy to go into victim mode. But if you really think about it from the other end, yeah.
Yeah, I was on a conversation today with somebody who is seriously in victim mode. And I have done some healing work, and if you read the story, you'll kind of get some hint of some of the healing stuff I was doing. And I did a Bufo trip. Do you know what Bufo is? It's a psychedelic. It's a DMT.
Yeah, the frog thing.
Yeah. And I did that in totally legal, safe, medically supervised in Barcelona. So don't do it anywhere unless it's completely legal, safe, and medically supervised, because it's pretty intense. But in that, I was kind of reminded in that experience, I needed to do healing. So anyway, I told this woman, I said, if you want me to try to do some healing stuff remotely for you. And she was just so entrenched in what she was dealing with and how it was caused and how she's a victim and how this stuff. And I told her, I said, I will tell you when I'm doing healing work that I'm getting messages and I don't filter it. Like, I can be your friend and say, okay, I'm really feeling sorry for you. But if I'm getting messages, I'm telling you what they're telling me and I can't filter it. Right. I just like, it's either me being your friend or me, And I said to her, I said, you're going to have to get over the victim thing. And she couldn't. And I know I went through many, many years ago, I went through a whole victim thing. And wow, I mean, that's powerful energy. It doesn't get you anywhere, but it's powerful energy. And you'll find plenty of people to back you up.
Yeah, it's seductive and intoxicating. And you can find evidence for it anywhere you look.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't help you, and when I went through mine, I mean, it was pretty intense, and it was for a year or two. And I had a friend who's like, oh yes. And this, he was so into the victim thing. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, you know what? I think I signed up to learn what this victim stuff is. Like, it was one of my little class curriculum when I was deciding my lifetime. And I thought, okay, now I know that, I can check that box and I don't need to do that anymore. And it wasn't until years later that I was talking to him, and he, he's very much a Leo. And so the bravado thing is very important to him. And I was like, I got to tell you something, and it's not necessarily going to come off right, but we got to talk about this whole victim thing. And it was just such a beautiful conversation, because all of a sudden, boom, he got it, and it was solved. Like, he knew that wasn't going to get him anywhere. And so, yeah. I don't know how we got off on that tangent, but this woman, she doesn't want to give up the victim, and she got really upset and like, I can't calm down. I can't deal with this. I was like, yeah, because you want to blame instead of realizing it happened to you for a reason. Whatever that reason is, that's what we have to get to the why.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to take 100% personal responsibility. It's really easy. And I try to discourage people from telling anybody that I'm so sorry to hear that, or I feel sorry for you, or anything like that. Sympathy and empathy are two different things. I don't think most people realize that. Sympathy is kind of like somebody fell in a hole and you decide that to help them, you're going to jump in the hole too. And now both of you are stuck there. It doesn't help.
Doesn't help.
Empathy is much different. It's like, okay, well, I've got a ladder. Let me go get it and come back,
Well, and I love that analogy.
I don't know where this victim thing comes from. I mean,
well, it's like, I've got a friend of mine, and she's got one.
I'm saying we all do it, and I've been there as well. But
yeah. No, I was just going to say, I have a friend of mine who's got one kind of illness after another, and I had to kind of tell her, and this might sound, I'm being authentic, right? So I'm telling you who I really am, but. I said to her, I'm not the one you come to if you want a pity party. I'm the one you come to saying, how do I fix this? You know, what is the why? Because everything I write, there's a big underlying message of the why, right? 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen is my first book. The why is so important. And so I'm like, you want solved. You want to talk about the why. You want to get to the solution. You want to get healed. I'm your girl. You want a pity party or somebody just to hold your hand. I can hold your hand to a certain point, but I'm probably not the one for the long term because I want you to get well. You know, I want you to get through this. I want you to get past this. I want you to get your why so you can move on and live a fruitful life. And there are other people that are good for the other, but I'm not the best person for that, I'm afraid.
I think everybody needed to hear this conversation.
Well, let's spread it out. Let's share it with the world.
Yeah. So I have to know, do you have any of your favorite reincarnation stories?
Oh, you know, I had an interesting experience the other day that I'll share, is that, because this is again, them, right? Like watching them manifest, and they're talking to me so clearly. And, but I am talking to somebody on an interview, and they asked me about a reincarnation story. And I said, yeah, there was really an interesting situation where I met a man, this is many, many years ago, and I met him on Mother's Day, and it just so happened that his mother a year earlier had committed suicide in this lifetime, and I had been his mother in a previous lifetime. So I'm on this interview. So that's pretty trippy right there, right? But I'm on this interview, and I have not talked to this man in 8 years, 6 years, 6 years. Not somebody I talk to regularly. All of a sudden he calls that night. Now, I was on a live interview. He couldn't have seen me. It was recorded. It hasn't aired yet. That's pretty wild. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've done a ton of past life regression and stuff on other people, on myself, and it's never going to be the thing that you think it's going to be. I recently did one on myself where all I could see was being like a little boy. Look down and see my feet, and I wasn't wearing any shoes, and I was right near a body of water, and I could see a sign, and I'll spell it, CHECAGOA. And so I did some research, and I found out that's how they used to spell Chicago. And I was like, well, how long ago was this? Right? And it's a couple hundred years ago that I was in this lifetime. And it was like, I guess people were just beginning to settle into that area. And I guess my family was a part of that, or something like that. But these things never fail to amaze me, is what I'm saying. You never know who you've been, what you've done in a past life.
Yeah, and I mean, this really tripped me out too. I had a friend of mine who does past life regressions, and she took me to what I would call a soul journey, right? It really wasn't a regression to another lifetime, but it was a journey to the other side. And one of the things I wanted to see the team, right? I wanted okay, let's powwow with this team. And I was mentioning that this team upstairs was trying to hook an American woman with a British man. And I had an encounter with his higher self in this session. The most powerful energy I've ever seen in my life. I mean, like, blew me away. Powerful. And it just starts going, okay, well, I mean, we all have our issues, and we all go, what do we need to learn? But I just thought, why he needs more help from this higher self. Like the higher self, he's got all this power, but here he's still, like I said, we all have struggles. So this is not a judgment of him, but it was more of a judgment on the higher self going, get your act together and go help this guy. Cause you got power and he needs your help. So, I mean, that was to me such an incredible lesson, and I've been through some of those lessons myself. And realizing, and that's one of the things, if you read the story, that I wrote, like I said, it's called The End, A Love Story to the Universe, is they're not infallible. It's not like we're idiots and they're all knowing. They're trying too. And so, and we need to ask for their help. Sometimes we need to freaking demand their help. Like, and so it was just really, really, and sometimes, you know, at least in this experience, I'm demanding help for somebody else. Like, this isn't fair. You need to help him. And I don't know. I mean, I've been around this stuff for a long, long time. I've never had these experiences before.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think it's something that, regardless of how you feel about it, you should give it a shot and see what comes up, because it changes you. It really does. Just having the information alone changes you.
Yes, and so just writing, like, you know, I say to people, that's why it's so important. You know, kind of keep reiterating, but the fictional or factual is so important, because if you just start writing and you go, okay, I think I remember I was this little boy 200 years ago, you know, on the shores of the lake in Chicago, great. And if you start writing it and you're thinking, okay, but I don't have any more facts to deal with it, just write. It'll come to you. And whatever comes to you matters. And nobody cares if you can prove it or not. Nobody cares if it's some, you know, oh, here's all the facts that go with it. Something in there is going to be a message to you. And just to sit down and write and let it flow, because I thought I was writing these characters, and then I always realized, no, they're telling me who they are. It was really, really, really profound.
I understand what you're saying. Even if it's fictional compared to what is reality, it's still factual to what's in your soul, because your subconscious mind kind of knows everything about everything. Yeah. And there's going to be these seeds of the truth in there that you don't even know that they're true or not, but they probably are. So it's interesting. I usually tell people to stop consuming so much garbage on TV and whatnot, and take that time and be creative and see what comes out of you, because it's much better to be a creator than it is to be a consumer.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's interesting too. I don't know if you've heard the noise that's coming through while we're talking. It's like a beeping.
Oh,
you hear that?
It's probably crickets.
Well, the reason I'm asking is just it feels like it's like some sort of reminder or something. It doesn't feel like it's necessarily just a technical glitch. Like something's trying to get our attention, and I find it really interesting. Like, I don't know. I'm making, you know, I forget what the, gosh, I can't remember the term now, but there's a word for like people looking for too many signs and too many things, that every little thing has a message in it. And you can,
I don't know,
it is a mental illness.
Maybe not. Maybe you're reaching, maybe not. But I'm pretty sure that those are crickets and like whistling frogs and stuff like that in the background.
That? Oh,
like, yeah, they're both similar in tone, and I can hear them. We just had a really bad storm yesterday, so everything's moist, and so you get crickets and you get those frogs that really like the moisture.
Well, they may have a message for us. You know, they can be little messengers. I know birds can be messengers. You know, so little spirits can come down and say hi in the form of a bird. I don't know about a cricket, but
I've got 4 birds in this room with me. You can't see them, but they're here.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe you. There's something overtly spiritual about birds. So how are we on this topic? We're supposed to be talking about reincarnation.
Yeah, we are, because I mean, if you like, okay, you leave and you want to come back and visit your friends. I mean, I don't know if that's officially reincarnation, just to inhabit a bird for a little while, you know. But that's one. I mean, that's not that far off the topic, you know. I had a friend of mine pass away recently, and about, I don't know, 6 months ago, and she was diehard atheist, like wasn't going to believe in anything after death, but she loved my stories. And I told her, I said, you know, when she first got diagnosed with a terminal illness, which was a couple of years ago, I said, when you go, you're going to have to come back and tell me I was right. and she just laughed and laughed and laughed. And then, she was on her deathbed and her granddaughter said, hey, Brownell wanted to remind you to come back and say, hey. And she gave her a big smile right before she went. So if nothing else, I caused her to have her last big smile. But I actually think she did come to see me in the form of a bird. So, it's all a mystery and it's all exciting, and you start seeing there's more to it than all this normal stuff that everybody else is dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder about it sometimes. So I've had some pretty strange experiences with birds recently, passing away and stuff like that. And then after they go, then you get like a message from the other side, and then it hits you. It's like, wait a minute. So this whole time I thought that was just a bird. That was actually somebody else, and that's why it seems so familiar.
Totally. I think it's, I don't know. I just think it's probably really easy for a spirit, especially one that is recently, passed, to come in and plus, I mean, come on. Isn't that one of the first things you'd want to do is kind of hang out as a bird and fly around and go see all your friends? I mean, it's not like you want to come back as a cricket. No offense to the crickets, but, I think I'd come back as a bird so I could fly around and go see everybody.
I'm glad you didn't hear that last thing I said.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say?
I said, and take a massive shit on people.
Oh, well, there are some people that you probably wouldn't want. No doubt about that. There might be some people that might, you might have a little of that.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that's really important to you about this work that you would like to share?
Well, I do, as I said, we have this podcast. If somebody is a writer and they want to submit a story, we're open. Most of them are short stories, like 1,000 to 3,000 words. We're on IMDb. So if somebody has aspirations to be a writer, they can get credit on that if they have an IMDb page. Join my Facebook group. Because I think we've got some really beautiful people there, and you can find some like-minded people to share stories. And, there's so many different points of view that I like, that everything happens for a reason. I wrote the book on it. So, if people could just start seeing there's more to it than what we realize, on the surface. And, hopefully, like the guy told me, I'm an explorer, let's just keep exploring. As soon as you think you have the answers, when the difference between the closed door and the open door, I don't know. What do you want to know? What are your big mysteries that you want to ask or know or share with people?
Well, I wanted to ask you, because we touched on this topic already, I think, but I wanted to ask you, what are some profound moments for the people who have submitted stories to you? Like, how have they healed from submitting their stories to you? Do you know?
Yeah. Well, I have one friend of mine. He is an accomplished screenwriter, and he wrote a short, and I said, you've got to write. He's written a lot of time travel, sci-fi type stuff. And so I said, you've got to write a story for my podcast. And he said, never in his life has he sat down and written something straight through. And it was done. Like, it flowed so naturally to him, so easily to him. And I just thought, now this is a sign, right? Because some of the people that are writing are writers who've never written on the topic. And some people are like, no, this is my personal story, and let me share with you my point of view and what happened between me and my dad or whatever. One of the stories that I wrote that's on the podcast called Justine, it was a short film script as well. And we had a group of actors read it. And they're like, as they're reading and, going through reading the script, they were especially two of them, like, you don't understand. This is my story. You wrote my story. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I didn't. I just wrote a story, right? But they're like, no, this is my story. 2 different people that were actors on that. You can't tell me that's an accident. That the right people are listening. I just want more people to listen to it. Very, very deep and profound story. And they were like, no, you've got to write this, and you've got to do it this way, and you've got to get this out there because this is really important. This is my story. So that and just going to people and talking with them and getting them to look at what they might write and what they might share. And some of them, one of the most beautiful things to me is that we first started out by doing a contest. And I had so much fun telling the people who won that they won. I had more fun than if I entered a contest myself and I had won. It was more fun telling them they had won. And I can't even believe that that's true, but it was so powerfully true. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's been pretty cool.
It does.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Brownell, tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, I'm Brownell Landrum. I'm sure you're going to have some links or something for people to find, but I'm the only Brownell Landrum in the world. So that's pretty easy. I have a website, brownelllandrum.com. So BROWNELLLANDRUM.com. Find my Life is a Trip Facebook group. You'll see a big stained glass, kind of modern looking stained glass kind of thing. So it's all very upbeat. Find my podcast. My story, The End, about the team upstairs, that's free. So I want to offer that to everybody to read. Some people have pressured me and asked me, is there a sequel? And I'm just going to say, yeah, they're telling me they want to keep writing. Even though it feels like the end, it's not. And then my We Meet Again trilogy. And just find me, you never know what questions can be asked, what can be shared, who can connect with each other, because we may sit there and think, oh, social media is this or this, but we meet people and connect on it gives us an opportunity to connect so powerfully with so many different people. And I love that. So that's what I hope.
Yeah. Awesome. Brownell, thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. We could probably talk all night, so I love it.
We could. Maybe we'll do that one day.
Maybe.
I'm Jahan Sator, a CTAA accredited cognitive behavioral therapist, hypnotherapist, nutrition coach, mindfulness teacher, and specialist in the area of subconscious self-sabotage. You may also know me as the host of Boundless Authenticity. I assist by showing people of all walks of life how to be mindful and allow the negative automatic thoughts about the events of the external and the associated programs to reveal themselves fully so that they can learn to establish deep inner peace and operate from purpose and passion. Much of my work focuses on removing the disempowering thoughts and beliefs from the subconscious mind, which cause us to create less than favorable emotional consequences and circumstances. I teach you various ways to change internal dialogue, clear harsh memories and emotions, and delete useless information from the subconscious. I also teach when to meditate, how to meditate, and why you have certain thoughts and feelings during meditation, and how to handle them effectively. If you or someone you know are struggling with self-sabotaging behaviors and harsh emotional consequences, please do contact me at selfsabotageinfo@proton.me. You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. psychology, conscious and the brain together, right?
We live in a multidimensional reality, whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean?
You know, all the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity Podcast.